Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Elena Marta, and I am the co-PI of the tracking project. The PI of this project is Francisco Chimoes. Welcome to this Proficient Roundtable. That is a webinar, one of the webinar series of the tracking project. What is Tracking Project? Tracking Project is a research effort developed across 7 countries, supported by the Youth Employment Fund. And this project involves an analysis of policies, best practices, and impact of public employment services in supporting rural needs aged between 25 and 29 in their school-to-work transition. In this project, we are particularly interested in understanding how PES digitalization is also affecting PES supporting processes with this group. And today, in this roundtable, we will speak about rural needs, these topics with very famous, very well-known experts on these topics. So I welcome and thank the expert with whom we will discuss today, and I would like to briefly introduce them to you. We will discuss about this topic with Gustavs Upmanis, that is Upmanis. It's right, Gustav? Upmanis?
Upmanis.
Okay, thank you so much. He's a Forbes 30 under 30 social entrepreneur and member of the Council of the Social Entrepreneurship Association of Latvia. His main focus is on empowering youth through online platform All Opportunities, and their latest project, Go Remote, focuses specifically on improving youth employment in rural areas through remote job offerings. Thank you, Gustav, for coming with us. Then we will have Luca Koltai. She is the research director of HÉTFA Research Institute, holding a degree in social policy and European studies. She has also completed courses on business ethics, equal opportunities, and non-profit management. Throughout her career, she has accumulated valuable experiences working at Budapest Esély in the National Family and Social Policy Institute, and as a prominent member of the Hungarian organization of Habitat for Humanity. As a researcher, her focus was primarily on employment and social issues encompassing public employment, youth, and people excluded from the labor market and social enterprises. Thank you, Luca, for being with us. And then Dr. Stelios Gialis is an associate professor of the Department of Geography, University of the Aegean, Greece, since 2014. He studied rural and urban engineering at the National Technical University of Athens and received his PhD in economy, geography, and regional development from the Aristotle University in Thessaloniki. Between 2012 and 2015, he was jointly affiliated with the University of Georgia, US, and the Hellenic Open University in Greece, doing postdoctoral research. He also served as scientific coordinator for participatory action research to address underemployment at the local level. He has authored, along with Professor Andrew Harrod, the book Labor Geography, Labor Agency, Flexible Employment, and Spatial Inequalities. Has a long track record of publication in peer-reviewed journals, including Geoforum, European Urban and Regional Studies, International Journal of Urban and Regional Research, Economic and Industrial Democracy. His research interests include labor and geography, the spatial division of flexible, atypical, informal employment, urban restructuring, and labor markets. So thank you again for your participation in this webinar. We are honored to have you here. And let us start with the first round of questions. How do your project cover the rural elements of needs? And what kind of contrast have you found the most interesting between urban and rural groups of needs? Who would like to start?
Whoever you prefer.
Perhaps Luca, that is...
Okay.
So I try to go one by one because it's 2 questions. So first, about our project. HÉTFA Research Institute is the lead partner of Lost Millennials project. And I would like to start presenting this project because this is one of our flagship projects. It's also funded by the Youth Employment Fund, by the Norwegian grant. And we are dealing with questions in relation to needs and 25 plus needs, which means we are working on the problems affecting older youth, so youth who are older than 25 years, and those who are not in education or in employment. In this project, we have a partnership of 13 countries, so we cover quite a big tranche of European countries, mainly focusing on Eastern and Southern Europe and Central Europe. And our goal was to increase knowledge on the effect of policies on this target group. So in this project, we've made several researches in 13 countries, and we were evaluating policies, different measures, practices, good and bad practices, so different practices which are working on to support youth all over in these countries. So first of all, you can check a lot of our activities in our website and a lot of our reports. So basically, I'm relying on these reports and relying on our research results as we have covered the situation of older youth in these 13 countries. So with our partners and with the lead of ZSI, one of our partners from Austria, we have made a report on the situation. So related to the second questions, what differences we found and see in those countries, I just want to highlight some of the issues. As in many countries, the needs rates are higher, a lot higher in the rural areas. It's a difference in between Western and Eastern, Southern and Northern Europe, but in the South and in the Central and Eastern European countries, rural areas have higher rate of needs. Needs are the youth who have not in employment or education. So it seems that youth in the rural areas have more burdens, have more problems entering to the labor market or staying longer in education. In the recent years, there were changes in the situation, but it seems while the urban areas had caught up and youth living in the urban areas get better situation, youth in the rural areas are still left behind. And in many countries, their situation didn't really change despite of the economic upcycle. So these youths are facing multiplied disadvantages in the rural areas. So it's not only the lack of jobs and work possibilities, but also they are lower educated, they're facing poverty, and family and childcare responsibilities are more often a burden of their integration. So it seems disadvantage and unemployment of youth have a lot longer term effect in rural areas than in the urban areas, and it's more severe on those rural settlements or small villages which are in the most disadvantaged position. Thank you.
Thank you, Luca, for our presentation and your comments and the results, the interesting results. And what about the other project?
Gustavs, do you want to speak? Or? Hi everyone again. I'm Gustavs Upmanis from All Opportunities, VC Space in Latvian. So I'm Latvian, and we have this project, flagship project as well, called Go Remote. And essentially, Go Remote project is with an idea that remote work and hybrid work could be really beneficial to people from rural areas, because after COVID, it was understood that it is that remote and hybrid work is up to stay for at least a bit, and it is actually possible to work remotely. And we wanted to explore that maybe not only all the high-level jobs and really like executives can work remotely, but actually that this remote job idea can benefit people also from less advantaged backgrounds. So that's what the whole pilot project was about. And we had a couple of steps in it. So we started by actually training these people, understanding what are the areas in which they want to gain expertise, and what companies, what kind of expertise do they want. Then we trained them. There were professions like digital marketing, data input, customer support, accountancy, and business administration. It happened in several countries, also EEA funded project. And then we provided them with mentoring, and then we provided them with events called job speed dating events, where they're matching with companies and actually meeting these companies in person. So that was the overall idea, and we wanted for it to be as open as possible, because all the activities were happening online. So we understood that we can target not only needs from rural areas, but actually needs from other areas as well as non-needs, because scaling IT solution, online solution, is not too hard. Obviously, you need a bit more mentors for training if you have like 50 or if you have 200 people, but in general, that it is quite doable. And we saw that essentially it's quite tough to reach needs, and especially to reach needs in rural areas. That was one of the biggest challenges that we had. We worked a lot with various stakeholders, with Employment Agency of Latvia. We worked with other youth organizations, social services, etc., just to get a hang on these people. And we in Latvia, the situation is quite specific, because Riga capital has half of the Latvia's population. So still majority of the people came from Riga, but we much more focused or targeting also digitally. We actually set Facebook ads on everywhere except for Riga, and we tried also different a bit communication, how to communicate with rural youth, which have slightly different jobs, economies, etc. And what we found out is that firstly, it's harder to reach them. But secondly, once they get reached, not all of them, we're more talking about a bit more motivated ones. We see that there's less opportunities available in rural areas compared to like cities. And that means that needs in cities, it's more likely that they're just not willing to do something, while people from rural areas are much more keen to actually get involved. And we saw that on our trainings, people were really thankful that they do not need to travel and commute to other places. And also, in general, that something like that for free was offered to them. But what was interesting, we saw that actually remote, like rural area people and needs were actually more communicative than those from the cities. So that once you get them engaged, that's when actually they open up and they're more willing to use their time, resources, dedication, all of that. So these are kind of some of the main findings. And obviously also the job opportunities are much more scarce in rural areas, and we saw that at least some people that we were able to provide the jobs, mainly they are still working in a big city, like 1 million city, companies. So, and working hybrid or remote. Now remote is slightly dying out, and remote as well, unfortunately. But essentially, they were really thankful to have these opportunities where they can work in different places, because as everyone knows, yeah, there's very limited amount of work that you can do and very limited amount of careers. And we hope that also projects like these will allow for young people not to move to another city, to actually stay in their location and yeah, grow their families, take care of their properties, etc. And now, actually, what's interesting, we're planning to make kind of second stage project after this, and we're not changing too much, but there is one thing that we realized that needs change. And that's that we want to focus with the initial beginning being on youth mentoring. We realized that having, especially with online activities, especially when you work with needs, especially when you work with rural areas, it's even more critical to keep them engaged, because it's so easy to lose those people in the process. You have 200 people who start an activity, and you have like 80 or 100, depending on the course, who finish it. So we realized that if early on, during the first stages, we provide mentors to them, and they don't need to be professional like psychologists or something. They can be just professionals in the careers that young people want to learn in and to take their first steps in. Then actually there's an accountability person. There's someone who once every 2 weeks checks in, asks, how are you doing? Why are you not doing this thing? What is stopping you? And that actually has a really strong beneficial factor. And we also saw that during the mentoring program, the mentoring was the thing which got people employees the most, because these mentors, not only they're helpful in motivating people, but also they have a wide array of knowledge on how to get these jobs, which are often even not listed. So essentially reducing this social divide by just linking people together, we saw that as a really beneficial thing, and we definitely want to continue it in the future. So yeah, quickly about us and NEETs in Latvia.
Thank you, Gustav. I found a lot of similarity with some programs we have in Italy too, regarding the beginning of the process, and how people are thankful if you give them something that is important for them, and they can consider themselves the focus, the attention of other people, and when usually they have low self-esteem, low self-efficacy, and they consider people with less value than the other people. And so I think that is a very important result, because it means that these young people need to be more protect, a little bit accompany more than the other young people, because they're a little bit more fragile. Thank you, Gustav. Stelios, what about your project?
Thank you, Elena. Thank you all. Nice to be here with you. Talking about Youth Serve, a project that is funded since 2018 by the Fund for Youth Employment under the generous support of the EEA grants. We focus especially on 4 countries of the Mediterranean EU South. But during the duration of the project, we expanded our analysis based on labor force survey data for other countries of the EU. And we focused on the regional level. And a focus on the regional level is very crucial in order to identify the rural regions first, and then start talking about the rural needs. So the rural regions are those regions that have an over-representation of the agricultural sector in their productive system. Other additional factors are characterizing rural regions, of course, distance from the metropolitan regions, relative isolation, etc., etc. What we found is something that is more or less has been verified by previous studies as well. The majority of the rural regions especially in the EU South, suffer from high need rates. So to give you an idea of the figures, we have some regions, some rural regions that have a need rate that is above 25%. So in these areas, in these regions, I'm talking specifically about Sicily or East Macedonia and Thrace in Greece, almost 1 out of 4 young people that are between 15 and 29 years old can be considered as not in employment, education, or training. Things are a little bit better for other regions that are close to 20%. These are some regions at the, let's say, not in the north, but also not in the south of Italy, the so-called third Italy, that's between the north and the south, and also some other peripheral, the Mezzogiorno area, etc., and also some other regions of Greece. And of course, there are rates that are above 10% and below 20%. Many of these regions that have such rates are in the south of Spain, Andalusia, for example. So the problem is here, is persistent, and many of the peripheral regions of the EU South and other regions, of course, of EU suffer have similar problems, have also high need rates. Please note that not all of them are specialized only in agricultural activities. So we have some peculiar cases of regions, of island regions, like the tourist regions of Greece, South Aegean or the Ionian Islands, which are both tourist and agricultural regions, and at the same time have high need rates. So we have focused a little bit more on this quantitative data by doing some extra qualitative research and analysis. And we came across some common findings, but also we found some new things. To briefly summarize, many of these regions that have high need rates are regions with a low GDP per capita. So they can be considered as poor regions. Also, the average educational level of the young people in that regions is relatively low. They have medium or low educational attainment levels, let's say. Another common problem they have or they face is that they don't have good or dense public employment services in their areas. And this is something that is related to the isolation they face. Another issue they face is that it's related to mobility. So it's not easy for them to travel. And that is also related to the low GDP per capita in their region, and also the low household income they face. Because, okay, perhaps it's not difficult to take a cheap flight and go for a trip in Europe for many of them, but in many cases, mobility within the country for young people is very, very expensive, especially after the crisis. The successive crisis. They also face cultural issues and divisions. And this is also related to the relative isolation. So they don't have the variety of clubs, museums, restaurants, and all these other facilities that urban needs face. What we found, and that is, we believe it's very interesting, is that there is a division within these regions between the needs that come from low incomes and have a relatively low educational level. These are the young people that are trapped in these peripheral areas. So this can be considered as typical cases of rural needs. Whereas on the other hand, there are more educated people within that regions, which are mostly unemployed, not inactive. They are searching for a job, and there is high possibility for them to leave the rural regions they come from and find a job either in the metropolitan region or in Northern Europe. And this is related to the so-called brain drain problem. I think that's enough for the first point. I don't want to spend your time, but these are the main findings we have.
Thank you, Stelios. I was thinking about these last comments you did, because this means that we need to have a strongest and clearest typology of needs, because in the classification of needs, we have the 7 Mascarini typologies, but then you say that also in the rural area, we have different type of needs. So perhaps this means that focusing on the regional level can help us in order to individuate these different typologies, and so think about intervention that are focused for them and that can help also them. Because I was really impressed when you said that in this area in which there are opportunities on the agricultural and tourist, we have already a high percentage of needs. This means that we need to do something urgently and try to better understand what is specific for them and really helpful for them, and not general policies that cannot reach their needs and their also dreams, I think, because we don't have to speak only about needs of these young people, but also about their dreams. Mariano, I don't know if we have questions or comments from people that are participating online.
At this moment, we don't have any questions, so we can follow.
Okay. I would like to ask something to our guests about the transition. In our project, we consider the digital transition, but we know there is also the green transition. So how do you see the twin transition affecting rural labor markets and job opportunities for young people? And moreover, are there any lessons or examples from your project on this topic that you would like to bring forward? In which order do you want to speak? Luca, do you want to start? Thank you.
Our project wasn't focusing on the twin transition, but we have some insights as working on the field and also evaluating different measures and policy activities. We saw some things, so it wasn't really in the focus. First of all, we saw a big skills gap. What I think Stelios and Gustavs also mentioned that rural youth are kind of not prepared for the twin transitions. We would think that all youth are born with digital skills. They have some digital skills, but these skills are not necessarily the ones which can be turned to a profession. So the digital skill gap is still bigger in the rural areas than in the urban areas. As Gustav also mentioned, the opportunities are different. So youth in the rural areas have less opportunities to join activities. For example, the internet penetration is not as high in the rural areas. The broadband is not really accessible for every location. So they are kind of left behind in the digital transition and also in the green transition too. For example, in Hungary, the agriculture tourism industry is still not moving fast enough to the green transition. They are more in the traditional ways now. So that means there are a lot of opportunities which will open for youth and those who are living in the rural areas. For example, we saw projects which are starting to move youth and children to these directions. For example, social economy is one of the options. We saw social economy organizations, community enterprises emerging in small villages where youth and not so youth people can come together and kind of live their dreams and start businesses which are focusing, for example, local green experiences, focusing on new ways of small-scale agriculture and food production. So these are the ones which are combining new methods, which are combining short cycles, product cycles, and which are combining rural cultural heritage. So I think there are good examples in the social economy. So we have to be aware of, we have to support these opportunities. And the other one which I would like to highlight is also very much connects to what Gustavs said, that we are working in a project with the Hungarian Reformed Church when they are working with youth and children to support them back or up to education. And they are focusing on e-mentoring and digital skills development. So for example, e-mentoring was one support of the project, which was a personal mentoring, but partly due to the COVID, partly due to innovation, was moved to online sphere. And it helped to reach out to those who were living in small villages and helped to connect youth who are living in bigger municipalities, bigger cities. So the mentors was youth, mainly in secondary and university education, and the mentees were younger youth and children, and they were connected mainly, not only, but mainly through digital platforms. So this is one of the projects we've evaluated, and we think it was worked very good to reach those who are usually left out of these projects and supported them to stay in education and study for longer period.
Thank you, Luca. So it was, we can say it was a kind of peer mentoring, what you evaluate, and that it works for these young people.
Yeah.
Okay. We have some questions, but I would like to give the floor to Gustav, and then I have some questions for you.
Yeah. Can you maybe phrase again the question so that I can?
Yeah, Gustav. The question is how in your project you see the twin transition, green and digital transition, is affecting the rural labor markets and job opportunities for young people. And from this point of view, so considering the two transitions in your project, do you see something that you think it's important to underline that can be exported in other contexts, or that you think you will use in a future intervention or research project? Thank you.
So essentially, with these twin transitions, both with digital and green, it's clear that the people who are benefiting the most from these transitions are the people who are frontiers of it. So in a sense, it's clear that privileged people are the ones who are the first to get benefit out of them. And that also makes it so that people with less privilege, and including people in rural areas, especially NEETs, they are the ones who are kind of left behind. And so the question is, so you can look at it two ways. One is whether overall this transition benefits these people, and second, whether it's equitable, whether it benefits them the same way as others. And it's clear that also these effects multiply. If you're already skilled in, for instance, like digital things, then you're going to be better in AI, and it's going to be much easier. So I think it's important to address that people with less privilege, including rural areas, etc. It's really important to provide them initially with the basic skills and to kind of set them on par with all of these things. And that's kind of what we were trying to do in the project. Yeah, by providing digital training for these digital professions. And what is also important that often the reason why people are not going to rural areas and why they're not helping out is simply because of economies of scale, because it's so hard to reach those people. You know, if you want to go to every small library and provide sessions on digital skills, machine learning, whatever, also you're not going to get that much of the general population. So you end up giving lectures to 3 people, to 5 people, and no one wants to invest in it. Both like public authorities, also corporate sponsors especially, they want to say we gathered so many people from so and so places, and so they think that it is not as efficient to invest money in these areas. So it kind of becomes like a vicious circle. And what we think is really a good way to move forward, especially with digital inclusion, is to actually have these lessons online and to provide for everyone all the software needed. For instance, like Excel, we provided to the people because, well, even 20 euro or so could be a hurdle for people to actually learn. Even better, even though it's hard, would be to provide them with computers, because often it's just like small Android phones, and just mentally it's much harder to focus on things when you're learning from this type of device rather than this. So providing them with as much technology, as much kind of software benefits, I think that's crucial, and enabling it all online is crucial. And third thing, which we're spiraling around, I think, is this mentoring aspect, this buddy aspect. It doesn't need to be necessarily external mentor. It can be even peer-to-peer mentor from the same group, because they still kind of hold each other accountable to what's happening, and so on. And then I think also the same economies of scale, or more like lack of economies of scale, applies to the job market. That also companies, at least in Latvia, they don't see that much benefit in having remote jobs, because most of the people are in Riga, at least most of the smart people, most of the educated ones. So they do not want to have these hybrid teams, remote teams, set small, now it's slightly increasing, but set small offices in other cities, because it's not economically beneficial and economically viable for them. So that is also this vicious circle, which we need to reverse. That once we start provide these skills and we find first people with these jobs, then also you can have a remote team from all around the country, and you don't need to worry about it too much. It's incredibly tough. Most of the teams are not able and willing to actually manage people fully remotely, especially in the larger corporates. At least in Latvia, I would think that in Central Eastern Europe, it's more or less the same. So this is kind of the digital divide in so many layers and so many vicious circles that it's really hard to overcome. So yeah, these are my 5 cents for the digital transition. Regarding the green and sustainable transition, well, the only thing that I can say is that also there's currently a lot of money from EU funds, other funds in order to help environment for all the green policies, etc. And one thing which is constantly forgotten, because it's when you talk about employment, is the commuting to and back from the work. And actually, like, this is a significant part where a whole project could be about reducing commuting just by introducing these hybrid and remote jobs. And it has additional spillover effects into employment, into flexibility. For instance, like young mothers really have benefits of hybrid and remote work. Similarly, people who need to look after someone, like one good friend of mine have a dog, and he's planning to leave his job because they're cutting his hybrid work. So essentially, investing money into green, like into remote and hybrid jobs, is also investing money into green jobs. So I think all of it should be as an agenda, because it has so many positive spillover effects. But currently, obviously, it's too many hurdles, too many new things that people need to learn in order to lead such teams, that it's a bit hard.
Thank you, Gustav. I was thinking that also in Italy, sometimes we have very big intervention with a lot of players, stakeholders, and you are able to reach 5, 7, 8 people. For them, it's really important, this intervention, but for the who give you the money for the intervention, it's a kind of failure. But I think it's important also to take care about 6 or 5 people, because these people have families, and then they through this work we can also build a trust in the institution also for these people. So I think that, as you said, we have a lot of effects also working with a small group of people, but sometimes this is not really appreciated by the founders.
And what I want to add is that not only the fact that the group is smaller, which already multiplies from 30 people to 5, like 6 times, but also the fact that every organizer, instead of just coming online, spending like 1.5 hours for 6 people, instead of spending 1.5 hours, you need to commute back. So it becomes whole day, like 4.5 hours. So it's 3 times, 6 times. So it's 18 times less efficient to do it in person. So, yeah.
Thank you. Stelios, what do you think about this topic?
Well, to start with, I think many things have been said by Luca and Gustavs, but starting from the high and persistent need rates in some regions, we can at least indirectly say that the twin transition is not having a necessarily positive impact on youth. Of course, things have to be analyzed further. I think that we have to, again, focusing on rural regions, it's good to distinguish between the impact of digital transition and the impact of the so-called green transition. The impact of digital transition is somehow controversial. So there are cases that the impact of digitalization, of better Wi-Fi connections, better internet connections, and digital infrastructure, etc., is positive, is creating some good new jobs in rural and isolated regions. And there are increasing numbers, or at least not decreasing numbers, of young people that work remotely while staying in a rural region. And this is good. So I know a young man from a small island of Greece that is working all night long as an IT specialist for an Australian company. So every night he goes into his room and he logs in, and he works for this Australian company doing software programming. And this is, of course, an opportunity for him. Otherwise, possibly he would have to work in the service sector or do a non-well-paid agricultural job. But there are other cases, of course, that new jobs are being lost. So banks are closing their departments, their branches in small rural areas due to digital services. So some new jobs are being lost, some potentially new jobs are being lost because multinational companies, banks, post companies, etc., are not funding their branches in rural areas. This is perhaps the case of the rural regions. It has to be of the digital transition. It has to be studied deeper. Talking about green transition, I think that its major impact upon youth is negative. From one point of view, of course, from a critical point of view, it's not a green transition. It is a so-called green transition. It includes a lot of greenwashing practices. I mean, buying new electric cars, it's not necessarily a sustainable practice. Something that will reduce the impact of manhood on and of modern civilization upon climate, etc., etc. But this is, of course, a big discussion. The issue is that, talking about the case of specific rural agro-manufacturing regions, there is a negative impact. I can recall, again, the case of a coal region of Greece, Western Macedonia, which is under decarbonization. And this is one of the Greek regions with one of the top 3 highest NEET rates. And this has to do with that due to the decarbonization, young people cannot find jobs in the power corporation, the public power corporation. It's not public anymore, but okay. And also they cannot find jobs in the ecosystem of other enterprises that were supporting the public power corporation. And this is more or less the case in other regions as well. Green transition, installing solar systems, etc., is not related to new good jobs for the young people, at least in general or on average terms. So the impact is somehow differentiated. We need to study deeper on that matter. And let me stop by saying that it's not necessarily about adopting through reskilling or upskilling practices the skills of young people to this situation. I mean, young people cannot be continuously under a re-education and reskilling scheme. It also has to do, it's related to both the demand and the supply side. So we have to think on how better policies can produce good and long-lasting jobs for young people in that areas, and not only on how we have to change or reskill young people in order to be adaptable to the local demand for jobs, because this local demand is in many cases not enough or not efficient. That's my general comment.
And about this, Stelios, do you have suggestions or ideas about some politics that could be developed?
Well, in the literature, there is an analysis of the so-called youth transition regimes.
Mm-hmm.
So the most efficient youth transition regimes so far in Europe, despite of their problems and negative aspects, are the one of Scandinavian countries. These youth transition regimes are more or less related to strong public funding. I think that we have to reinvent better welfare policies for youth, because youth guarantee is not enough, believe me. And we have to think about regional, peripheral, rural policies that finance young people in order to stay at their places and find a job there or fund good jobs there for young people in order to have a strong motive to stay and not leave. So for sure, one aspect of the story of the solution is strong welfare public policies that create new jobs and new employment. It's an old idea, but I cannot see a much better idea. Of course, through digital transition, etc., and by giving specific skills to young people, other extra local ecosystems may be created. But believe me, these ecosystems will not be resilient enough if they are not supported by general welfare theorization that goes beyond contemporary analysis of, what costs, what things that have a high cost must be reduced or cut off. This is also related to the demographic problem, the population decrease rural areas face, but it's another discussion, of course.
Quick question. Maybe you can sketch out the module used in Scandinavia. You mentioned the youth transition. How is it called?
Well, they have very strong institutions starting from the educational, from the primary and the secondary school. They are very supporting in terms of doing mentoring to young people that are trying to find their way out in the labor market. Perhaps in our case, in YouthSER project, we tried to critically adopt a Norwegian methodology, which is called Ripples in Water, that is specifically focused on how disadvantaged young people can reach the labor market. One of the basic ideas of this policy is that there are specific mentors for every 10 or 20 young people that come from disadvantaged environments that continuously monitor how these young people do during their first years in the labor market. And these mentors, the so-called key account managers, are also interacting with the employers or the potential employers of these young people in order to discuss with them if they face any difficulties. They try to persuade them not to fire these young people, but get extra funding in order to keep them employed. They are negotiators, mentors, etc. But you can understand that these very peculiar or very, fantastic policies, at least from the EU South perspective, are well funded because there is one mentor every 20 people, and this happens across all country. But this comes with a price, with a specific welfare policy that funds such kind of mentoring on a wider scale.
Thank you. Thank you, Stelios. There are some questions. The first one is, I think, for Gustav, and is where there are any structural deficiencies in terms of digital aspects in rural areas, fast internet connection and computers, and how did you address them? I think it's regarding your remote work project.
So a couple of things. Firstly, Latvia is a rather small country, which is in a sense good for us because we have relatively good internet coverage throughout the country. So that helps already a lot. Secondly, we realized that there is there's a lot of people who do not have computers fully by themselves. Often they have it together with the family or so, and maybe it's not always accessible for them to use it. So we made all these sessions in platforms which are accessible on mobile and which are really mobile friendly, including communication is on Slack chats rather than emails. So kind of modern chat way communication. We didn't manage to go like much deeper into that, but well, we provided everything that's necessary so that people can learn skills on their Android phones, obviously except for Excel skills. Like once they needed that, then yeah, they needed to have a computer. Unfortunately, we were not able to support them too much, but we didn't see many people writing or complaining about it, obviously, because also they're a bit more passive, most likely. But also somehow it did not feel as that big of an issue in our particular case.
Thank you, Gustav. And we have also a question for Stelios. Have you found a correlation between the NEET rates in tourist and agricultural areas and the informal economy? Are they NEETs throughout the whole year, or are they just working in the informal economy in seasonal jobs, in your experience? And it's a question for Stelios, but also for Gustav and Luca, if you have experience about the legal economy or informal economy.
It seems that there is a strong correlation between those two phenomena, let's say. Of course, talking about statistical correlation, it's not easily identifiable because, as you can understand, informal employment and informal practices are not necessarily registered by official statistics, and that way they cannot be easily statistically tested. But yes, it seems that there is a one, and it's not only that there are a lot of informal practices that are involving young people in the rural areas. There are also semi-informal practices that are related to various violations of the law. So perhaps a common practice in Greece rural regions is to hire a young man, a young lady, to work either in the agricultural sector or in the tourism sector during the summertime, but using a part-time contract and for 3 months. But if you approach this young guy or this young lady and discuss with them, you will understand that they are not working part-time, they are working full-time, and they are taking half of their salary as black money, informal money, pocket money. And the main motive that the employers have in order to implement such part-time contract is that they want to avoid the indirect salary, paying for social contributions. And the bad thing is that young people consider this as a regular situation and they accept such part-time contracts because they believe that earning half of their salary in terms of informal money, pocket money, let's say cash in hand money, it's better for them because they also avoid paying taxes. They pay low or even no taxes. Of course, they do not reflect upon the impact these part-time contracts have on their pension because they feel far away from being a pensioner. This is one case of an informal practice that is very common in agricultural or tourist areas, at least in Greece. Perhaps you can indicate many others. So there is a relationship, a strong positive relationship, not very easily statistically identifiable.
I think it's the same in Italy. I mean, in some region at least. I don't know if it's the same also in the experience of Gustav and Luca.
Yeah, we have kind of similar experiences. Tourism is not a very big thing in the rural areas of Hungary. So the Hungarian tourism is mainly focusing on Budapest and Lake Balaton. So there are areas, but the disadvantaged rural regions don't have too much tourism. But the agriculture is an important part of the business there. So informal jobs and informal employment is present there. Of course, we have similar statistical issues, what Stelios already mentioned, that it's very hard to find a statistical correlation. But in Hungary, we have a big sample survey among youth, which is a representative big sample research. And we see from that informal employment and the forms what Stelios have already mentioned are quite common among youth, and the younger they are, the more common. So, for example, teenagers, it's a lot more common than those who are over 25. So they're employed in kind of in the shadows. So partly legally, but partly not. So there are different practices. Youth are more easily found themselves in threshold jobs and vulnerable jobs, even if they are employed. So that's the situation. And sometimes they are seems like needs, but they are in 1 week they are needs, and the next week or day they're doing some informal kind of job. But in the most disadvantaged peripheral villages or microregions of Hungary, there are very little opportunities even for informal positions or jobs or works. So they are mainly inactive.
Thank you, Luca. Gustav, do you want to add something about this topic?
Just the Latvia has really similar situation. Well, no, but in general, everything that's said, I agree that it's a bit more common in rural areas, especially with low-paid jobs, and it is harder for people to get out of these jobs. So, just agreeing.
Yeah, I think it's also a complex and complicated topic because. It means not only to speak about job, but also about to pay tax, the representation of the common goods, of the institution, about democracy, about what the duties and the rights of people. So it's also a cultural topics, I think, and I think that regarding the young generations, we as older, I mean, I'm older than these young people, we have some responsibilities about this, but we have also the resources, I think, to better understand and then give them the opportunity to think about what does it mean to be part of a society, to be part of a community, and to them and also to the people that give to them this informal work. But I think it's a very difficult topic, and unfortunately we don't have time. Our time is over. I thank our guests because I found their comments and their presentation very insightful and inspiring, and also in the comments and that arrived in the chat, the topic of mentoring seems to be one of the most important, and we found a lot of common things in these three projects, but also in Trakin that we are working on, especially about the impact of digital transition. And I would like to share the information about a special issue on politics and governance, in which we take particular care about this topic, the impact of digitalization in public and private services, but also in the perception of young needs and young people in general, rural and urban. And also in our website, the website of Tracking Project, there are a lot of documents and information about this topic. So I invite all the people that are seeing this webinar now or that will listen to the webinar in another moment to visit our website. Thank you so much again to our guests. Have a good afternoon, and we hope to have you in another occasion and for another discussion in another moment of our project. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Elena. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
See you soon. Bye.
See you.
Bye.
Bye.